So as much as it does pain me to say it, all tutorial series actually do have to end like a line segment. This is the end of the line, the last bite of the hamburger. So in this part 4, we're going to be making the vegetables, mainly being, I guess, a tomato and lettuce. You could also use these techniques for pickles or whatever else. I got to be very careful to not swear in this tutorial, by the way, because we're actually sponsored. Yay, we did it. So we got to keep this one clean, which I struggle with a little bit, but I'm going to do my best. So what's the point? The point is in the last 3 parts, we made the bun, we made the meat with the cheese, we made the bacon, which was actually its own little challenge right there. And we're going to use all these techniques to now model the rest of this. So what you're going to need for this final part is a picture of a tomato, which I already loaded. But my little ape brain was like, oh yes, let's forget about that. Tomato image, make sure you have one, and also lettuce image. And the reason we have both of these is, who has time to make it procedurally? You know, we have images, we can make it super fast. So, once we have that, I guess we can begin. So, let's start. God, I read another comment. I know I say I don't read comments, but sometimes it gets to me. I'll go down to the comment section and start reading. Somebody said it's not only okay, right? I say okay all the time. I also say so in the middle of every sentence. So, just did it. I have no control over it. So, let's make a tomato. I've already added in a plane. We're going to use basically the same technique as the bacon, but a bit modified. So for this one, tomato texture, wow. I would not recommend eating cookies right before this. The crumbs get in your throat, and then you start feeling crummy, and then, you know, that's really it. Color, make sure it's connected to base color, and I guess we don't have an alpha channel. And for this one, we're literally just going to cut out with the knife tool instead of doing what we did last time with the volumetrics and all this. We might end up doing that for the lettuce, though. So once you have this thing, you just click K, you start outlining this, and I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just add in a circle instead of a plane, and then you can reposition the vertices? And that's a good point. But then you should be making the tutorials, not me. In all seriousness, the reason you don't do that is because then you have to do these vertex sliding maneuvers that then move the UVs, which ends up, you know, making it so that you have 2 steps. You have to do that, and then you have to remodify this, like, project from view UVs. So that's why I use the knife tool. It's easy. We're basically cutting out a circle. The finer you do this, the better. However, I'm just going to do it with, like, I don't know, 30 segments or something like this. So select the face, Control-I to invert and delete faces. So now we just have this. And by the way, if it's looking super weird here, just remember there's volumetrics. And I also want to mention that if you're getting weird shadows and stuff like this, which we're not, but in case you are, you want to go, because I didn't mention this last tutorial, go to light paths and take your transparency passes up. So if they're too low, you're going to see that there's some weird stuff, some weird S-H-I-T. It rhymes with dip. No, it doesn't. It rhymes with clip. It's kind of hard to find something it rhymes with when you're going on the fly. Either way, make your transparency passes higher, because then it fixes the volumetrics, which look weird otherwise. Okay, tomato. We've done this texture thing. Great. You want to select everything. E for extrude, and give it the thickness of a tomato slice. And we are going to fix the rim. I know it's supposed to be one color, especially if you look at this. This is like a bright red kind of thing. I mean, this is set dressed, right? This isn't realistic. These aren't realistic beauty standards for tomatoes, but it should just be one color, relatively. So if you ever look at the outside of a tomato, you already know that. Okay, so we have this. Let's make it look a bit better. Couple things, first of all. And you could have done this with a solidify modifier, but I'm just baking it in. I guess we should do this in solid mode. I'm selecting the top and bottom faces, I for insets, bring it as much in as possible. One thing you're going to notice with the knife tool is it does create these weird artifacts. There are ways to get around this, so you can pinch it like really thin, but it really doesn't matter for this, right? So just get it as close as you can. Wow, those cookies, dude, those cookies. The reason we're adding in geometry, by the way, is because since the UV is already baked in at any point, and we are getting this weird kind of effect where we can't see what's going on with the faces. It's weird. But the point is, you can select the face with proportional editing enabled, move like chunks of this, and then the tomato is going to move with that deformation. So this is just a good way to make this look more organic, pun intended, haha. How else can we make this look real? Well, it's the usual tricks you should already be used to at this point, like actually giving your materials a good name. So you say tomato, I say give it a material, tomato. Take this, connect it to height. Again, the reason we do this is to create normal mapping for free. So let's just plug that in right there. It's going to look a bit too bumpy, but it does give it a bit of dimension. So before, after. This one we're going to make very, very small, the strength, because tomatoes are very glossy. What makes them look realistic is the fact that they're watery, and especially in some areas here, they're more shiny. In fact, they're a bit transmissive, but we're probably going to skip over that. So to get that roughness idea, I think we've already talked about this before, we can still extract more information from this image. So for example, in this image, it just so happens, I think, it's not exactly true, or maybe it's the opposite of what I'm thinking. Basically, the color determines how shiny it is. So is it that the red areas are the shiniest and then the white areas are kind of like the rind, they're not shiny at all, or is it the opposite? I'm not quite sure, but whatever. Either way, use a color ramp. This is a good way to isolate sections of it, so we can isolate what is the white areas. So again, this is, these areas right here are being isolated. And then, like, as for which parts are shinier, that's up to you. I think, and I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, do the opposite. It seems like the red is supposed to be the shinier part. So in other words, what we have as white right now should be white. It should be a very large value, relatively, so that it's a roughness, very high in roughness. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? What I'm trying to say is the white area, this thing we've isolated, should be very rough, not very shiny. And what the black area is, again, the area that has very low roughness, we can set it to something close to 0, maybe not exactly, but like 0.1, just so it's not like literally a mirror. And then we connect this to the roughness, and then we have a nice little approximation of which areas should be shiny. Cool. And again, we addressed this before. By we, I mean me. You have no part in this. You're just the viewer. I don't know why that made me think of 1984. Am I Big Brother? No, I'm a good guy. We already talked about this, but the rim is it rhymes with duct. And the issue is we have the normal mapping distorting it, and the color is supposed to be one color. So to fix this, let's just make a second material. There's fancy ways to do this, but this is probably the cleanest. So we're going to add in a second material slot, so one object can have multiple materials, and this one is going to have a second tomato material, which we can call tomato rim. Okay, so right now, this isn't affecting anything, right? Because everything is assigned to the tomato material. We want some of it to have the rim, and to do that, you just select the faces that you care about, you click Assign, and now this has the tomato rim material. Well, what are we going to do differently about this one? Well, one thing we can do is probably just get rid of all this. Anything that depends on the image, we don't care about, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And now you can really see it's isolated. For the base color, I'm just going to, and maybe it's best to do this in look dev mode, just so we get a little less shine and stuff like this. I'm just going to sample E for eyedropper, or for my brain's just going to places I should not be talking about. We can kind of sample a color and then kind of hone it in to what we want, messing around with the vibrance, the hue, stuff like this. And let's see that in rendered mode. That looks pretty good. We can have this have its own custom roughness, so I guess it should be pretty shiny, something like 0.2. And we can mess with normals and stuff like this, but I think it's fine. So shade smooth. Well, I guess that's the best we're going to get out of shade smooth. This is one reason the knife tool does suck, although you could do a subdivision surface and all this. But okay, we have a tomato. We can modify it with proportional editing and all this, but let's not get carried away. Let's just put it inside our burger. So position it up here, move it up. By the way, I just click H on the bun just to hide it. And how big are tomato slices? I guess they're thicker for one. So let's see if we can do that. We select the center, Control plus a couple times. This just expands our selection. That's a little trick. And then without proportional editing this time, we make it a bit of a thicker tomat. Yes, that is nice. It really looks realistic, and of course it should, because we just referenced, existing textures. I'm just going to make this a bit rougher. I'm noticing it's a little too reflective. What was the point? The point is we need a set dress. So I'm just going to set one here, where we can duplicate this one, position it, I don't know, somewhere here. And again, this is a good time to actually whip out proportional editing. Whip it out, open your pants and whip out that proportional editing, because now we can actually layer tomatoes on top of each other. And yes, you could do the kind of cloth simulation cheese idea that I was talking about before, that we did before, but it just, there's no point. There really isn't. especially for something like this. Like for this one, we'd want it to be way over, but I'm just going to dip the tomato under as if there's like room for that, even though there isn't. And let's add, I mean, this is a generous hamburger. You're never going to get this many tomato slices at this ripeness and size. But whatever, let's just say that this is a good burger. I'm just going to rotate some of these slices, make it look a bit varied. This one could be a bit rotated. Bring that down. And okay, we have tomatoes. Again, different burgers will look different. You just want to set dress this until it looks like the burger that you want. So let's do Alt-H, and now we have that back in. Finally, lettuce. We're going to do kind of a hybrid method. This one I've been experimenting around with where half the time it looks good and half the time it just looks awful. It just doesn't look like a hamburger. So I wonder which one we'll get now. So again, plain material. This is going to be a lettuce make a material. Let's load in the image. So for this, we're going to use the hybrid of the bacon technique because, again, this is an image with an alpha channel. What do I mean? What I mean is we connect base color, we connect alpha, we update it for some reason. It needs that. And you can see we have this transparent thing. Again, the issue with this is no matter what we do to this, whatever kind of deformation or whatever, at the end we want to give it thickness, so we do the solidify modifier. But again, there's nothing in between, right? Which is why we need to execute order 60s, I forget, the trick to begin with. But before we get to that, let's make it look a bit more like lettuce. So what I'm thinking is, and this is just a technique I've been playing around with, what we do is we're going to subdivide this a couple times. And the trick here is you don't want to subdivide it too much because the method I'm about to show you, it benefits from not having that much detail. So maybe one more round, maybe. The method is we're going to use proportional editing, but this time for the type of fall off, we're going to use random. Basically what this does is it's proportional editing, but every vertex within the area is displaced by a random number between 0 and 1, or like a strength value of 0 or 1, something like that, which is going to give it this very, I mean, I know what you're thinking. You are messing this up, but it's a variation that's actually going to be useful because when we apply, it's definitely one of these. I guess you could do subsurf. That smooths it out. Another way to think about this is you could do it with smoothing. The point is, this is a nice way to add in variation, which we can then smooth out. And again, we can always like take this down a bit. So I'm just scaling on the z-axis. What's the point? It smooths it out, and if we look through the material view, it keeps the transparency where it's supposed to, but it makes it look like there's crinkling in the leaves. Why do we do this? Because there's supposed to be that there. Now, in reality, it's supposed to be much more extreme than this, right? But this is just like a demo scene, and we can actually make it look pretty good. And different hamburgers have different kinds of lettuce. That's another thing to think about. So once we have this, now we need to think about hierarchy again. So first we're smoothing, then we want to add in a bit of thickness. So again, we're doing the solidify, which does have the issue from before, but we're going to fix it. If you recall, the solution is adding in a volume in between, and we do a special little expression to say where we do and don't want, wow, we're not on full screen, where we do and do not want volume. So I'm going to add in volume. Let's get rid of the density. We need it to be a higher density so we can actually see it. And you can see the volume actually deforms with the surface, right? Which in this case is useful since we need the area in between the leaves to move with it. You get the point. We need the density to only exist in between the lettuce solidify leaves, right? The way we thought about doing this is if you take an alpha, connect it to the density, which right now is 0 to 1, so you multiply it by like a big number. Point is, I just want the density to be huge where it's supposed to be. So here's the alpha channel, and then we want it to be huge where the volume's supposed to be. But remember, this doesn't work. It doesn't show any volume because, why is it? Pop quiz, do you remember? It's because this image texture, which has the alpha inside of it, is using UV coordinates, right? If we actually show its coordinate system, it's using this two-dimensional U and V, X and Y coordinate system. Instead, we need basically that, but with the z-axis, and that's what generated is going to give us. And this only works for planes and very specific scenarios. But point is, now we have the alpha with thickness where it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to make that times 1,000, just so it's hyper thick. And when we view it like that in the volume, and then we put a surface on top of it, you can see we filled in the area. With which color? With the color of the texture. And that will, it might generate a couple issues, but it doesn't look too bad, especially if you go to the transparency passes and bring those up. Especially for this one. If you do not do it, so I'm going to go back to low passes, it's going to mess stuff up. If you look at the wrong angle, you can see there's some like black and stuff over here. That should be fixed when we, whoops, not that one, when we bring up transparency. You see it goes away. Okay, so what do we want to do with this? So again, I mean, I guess there's, you know what, before we add it in, just let's do the usual, just a bit of dressing, right? So, God, that's another pun. There is dressing. Well, it's not dressing, it's like condiments on a hamburger. Color, we connect it to height, Y to get free normal mapping. This is just free detail that will make it look real. Maybe at half the strength, and then for the reflection, I mean, if it's washed lettuce, I guess it should be pretty shiny. And, you know, we could go with the methodology that some areas should have different roughnesses than others, but whatever. What were we talking about? Set dressing. So I'm going to position this here. Now, this part's a bit harder to make look good because we are going to need to do a second pass of proportional editing, and lettuce should be, like, sticking out in certain areas and not others. But we can always reference our image. So I'm just going to take our lettuce, duplicate it, rotate it. Again, it's going to inherit our whole volume situation that we made for it. Okay, so right now it's not looking too hot, but don't worry, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to render it and have a good time. Okay, so that's a good start. Just to make it look a bit more realistic, a couple things that I would recommend. One, have it stick out in some areas more than others, like, you know, wasn't a properly made burger, which is actually realistic because most of them aren't. Another thing, proportional editing, this time set to smooth, so we don't get the randomness, right? This is used to, you know, do an overall positioning of our lettuce, just like we did with the bacon and the tomatoes. And again, because we have a hierarchy of modifiers, the solidify moves with it. So I'm just going to position some lettuce down, some of it up. I don't know. I mean, there is an argument to, and I'm thinking about it, there is an argument to connecting all the pieces of lettuce into one mesh. I don't think it should break anything, because then we could just modify it as a one piece. We do lose a bit of control, though. But I'll do it just for the sake of this, or I'll try it. So we take all these, we join, let's see what happens. It might mess something up. Yes, it does. Why does it mess something up? Probably because of the volume. So good experiment there. I guess we're going to do it individually for now. So just take those faces, bring them down. And I think the overall goal, other than positioning, what's going to make this look realistic is a hamburger is like very compressed, right? There shouldn't be gaps of air in between. So we just want this to get as squished as possible. And then if we do some like repositioning and stuff like this, it's going to help it look realistic. So again, mess around with the proportional editing. The longer you take to do this, probably the more realistic results you can probably get out of this. So I'm going to lift some sections up, some down. And then for the overall object, I think I'm just going to move this in a little. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Couple things we can do to the, by the way, there's some weird artifacts if you have a reference image in the background. Of course it doesn't matter, but since we're not going to render that, but just interesting. A couple things to make it look a bit better. Let's mess with the lettuce material. So the color that's going to base color, I want to mess with that. So I'm going to do a hue saturation, that value situation. So now we can, you know, how bright is the lettuce, etc. And I guess this should also be going to the volume since it's inheriting it. I want to make this, I don't know, it kind of depends on your burger. Do I want it to be like saturated or desaturated? I think the saturation's fine. I want to take the value down a bit because right now it's right now it's looking like the lettuce is much brighter than it should be, in my opinion. And again, we need to bring this lettuce down is our goal. We want it to look as compressed as possible because that's what physics would do again. And we just want to move our bun downwards. Okay, cool. We can also execute another trick that we talked about last time. So that's the object info. So this is going to give us the random. It's going to give us a different value between 0 and 1 for each of the objects that have this material. There are 3 users, right? 3 pieces of lettuce. Each one's going to get a number like this. And then what we can do with it is we can either vary the hue. So some pieces of lettuce are a tiny bit more yellow. Which I think is kind of a good way to think about it. And we can also change value and stuff like that. So for example, we're going to do a map range because right now this is 0 to 1. We want to constrain it to something like, well, hue is going from like, I don't know, 0.49 to 0.51. You can experiment with that. So the hue, which should be 0.5, can go as low as, you know, minus 0.1 or as much as plus 0.1. And that should just add in a tiny bit of variation. It's more noticeable if we go down, then you get some like purple pieces of lettuce and stuff like that, which is why we keep it kind of subtle. We can do the same thing again, but this time for the value. And this is just things that will add in a tiny bit of realism. We want the value to be centered at 0.8. So we can have them go as low as 0.7 and as high as 0.85. Just so there's variation, maybe visible variation, but nothing crazy. Okay, that is looking pretty good. I'm just going to do one final modification because we literally have a lettuce sticking out of the thing, which ain't a good time. There we go. And then finally, I guess there's an argument for putting lettuce on the bottom as well, since I guess our reference does. But I don't, like, I know that's what the reference shows, and I guess that's, like, technically correct. I've never had a burger where they put in lettuce on the bottom as well. I don't know if they're lazy or whatever, but this is usually what they stick with. So I think we are happy with this burger. At any time, you can go back and change any of our procedural settings. A lot of this can be gone back to and modified. Like, remember, just the bun strength is, something we can go back to. The seed variation, the sesame seed variation, stuff like this. But for now, I think I'm happy with this. So let's dress up our scene and move on to rendering. Yay! Let's take a moment to appreciate what we've done. We've made a hamburger that looks pretty realistic even from close up. I mean, we do need to compress it a bit more. That's just set dressing. But in theory, we have a very good looking hamburger. And if you see it from not super up close, it just looks real. The closer we get, it breaks a little, but it's pretty good. If I was doing another pass of this, I'd definitely do condiments and ketchup and stuff like this. But for now, let's do some set dressing, which I keep saying. So I'm going to put in a plane, just like a thing that this burger can sit on. And I think what I want to do with this scene, I'm just trying to pick the best camera angle. Like, which way do we want to render from? Probably one of these directions. So you take the opposite wall, you extrude upwards, just so it has like a backdrop. You bevel it. So this is just like a basic lighting setup, right? You shade smooth. So it's kind of like we're doing this in the studio or something like this. Make sure that's shade smooth. Do we have a camera? We do not. So let's make a camera. And this is like literally how I do all the renders you see at the beginning of the tutorials. I just kind of do this process really quickly. It doesn't take that long. Okay, so something like this. We can always rotate the burger later. I want the camera to be very zoomed in. So the focal length, instead of moving the camera closer, I just want to have it zoom in. Which also changes like the way the burger looks. Like things tend to look a bit more flattering sometimes if you zoom in rather than come up close. But sometimes you could do the opposite effect intentionally. Okay, so we have that. And just so I don't see any of the nonsense in the background, viewport display, passer part out. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, cool. Final things you can play around with, the world settings. Do you want to change the HDRI? Which one do we have right now? I think we have the one I was hovering over. This is a good time to play with different lighting scenarios, different HDRIs. I think this one actually makes it look a whole lot better, a whole lot more realistic. And remember, with an HDRI, which is a spherical image, you can rotate it to get different lighting conditions. So now the light's coming from this way. We could have the light coming from above. I don't know. I mean, I guess... you play around with it, but I really like the way this looks without, messing around with it too much. Just some basic stuff. So let's do a tiny little scene. I'm thinking like a 45-second render, or 45-second render. We'd be sitting around here for a while, but not really, because this video is sponsored by a render farm, but we'll get back to that in a second. 45 frames seems okay. What I want for this animation, nothing complicated. I think I just want the burger spinning and maybe, getting larger. We'll see what we want with that. Before we do this, just a tiny thing. If you are done, like you don't want any more procedural control and you just want to set this in, first of all, let's do a save just for that. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to call this burger final. Yay. Once you're happy with this and you know that you don't need to mess around with anything more, especially if you send it to a render farm that isn't yet compatible with 2.93, which I think most of them aren't. But just to be on the safe side, what you want to do is something that uses geometry nodes, a way to apply geometry nodes, because right now if you were to go to the modifier, you click apply on this, you see the sesame seeds go away. The way you do this is you type in, I think it's called make instances real. Yeah, or you could just hit Control-A, make instances real. And that's just going to put a bunch of objects on here, which we could join. That shouldn't mess with it too much. We can join it into one big sesame seed as long as we pick an active object. Let's try that again. So now we have, whoa, would not recommend that. Apparently we've created a mess. Make sure you make instances real. This is going to make all of them an object, which yes, becomes cumbersome if you have a lot of particles or a lot of points and stuff like this. But for now, just make sure you do this, or render farms and stuff like this will not work and stuff like that. Additionally, we are going to make a empty, and this empty is going to control the animation of the rest of this. So what I want to do is I'm going to go into wireframe to make sure I see everything. I'm going to select all these objects minus the plane, and then shift click the empty. Whoops. I want to make sure the empty is the selected objects. I guess that's control click. And then I think you can just do control P parent, which is going to freeze for a second because we have a lot of objects. Let's wait on that. There we go. Now we have an empty, and now we should be able to move this around as a single entity, which is perfect for animation. So what do we want from this? Let's keep it simple. I'm going to, let's say on the last frame, or no, let's say on frame 40, so there's 5 frames of buffer, we keyframe the location, rotation, and scale, and then on frame 0, we want it to like rotate by 180 degrees, or you know what, let's have it rotate by like 300, and before we do this, let's go to solid mode. We're gonna have it rotate by 360 degrees, just so it comes in, spinning in, so I'm gonna keyframe the rotation. I also want the scale to be 0, and we could keyframe the scale, and you could mess around with the location. But you can see this is going to make it look like the burger's just coming out of the abyss. And additionally, what's going to make this look super cool is a bit of smoothing. So go to Graph Editor, and then you're going to see any animation we did here. If we rescale this, our scaling, whatever, all of this is in graph form. So if we take this, we go to individual centers, we can then scale everything by 2 on the x-axis. So again, I'm just SX2, scale on the x-axis by 2, and that's just going to add in a bit of smoothing to our Bezier, and it makes it look like it's really popping. So here's the before animation, and then here is the after. It's just much more snappy, okay? And now that I think we're done with our scene, let's prepare this thing for a render farm. So we finally made it. I don't think I've sworn too much in this, so I think we're good. This tutorial, this whole series, I guess, in some sense, is sponsored by Concierge Render, which is a render farm that I've used for various projects in the past, and I'm using it to show you how to render this. So let me show you how you would render a project like this that we've made from beginning to end on a render farm. So before just taking this blend file and just uploading it to Concierge, you do need to do a bit of work. There's an add-on for this, but it's really just like 2 button clicks. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to File, Clean Up, and clean up all your like unused blocks. This is just so that your file size is smaller and we're not calculating for things we do not care about. Second thing is we are going to go to External Data and click Automatically Pack into Blend. And you can see packed 5 files. So any image, so like the tomato image, the HDRI, any like asset we used for this is now packed into the blend file. So we can upload a single blend file to the render farm instead of that plus images and stuff like this. And I guess technically a third thing is whatever settings you want here. You could change it later on Concierge, but any settings you want, you could, just set them here. So I want, I don't know, 200 samples. I mean, whatever. You pick your frame rate, you pick your render. I think you even pick your file type here, although I'm fine with like PNG and all this. So make sure you do all that, and then somewhere, I think for me it's going to be on the desktop, you're going to have a blend file called Burger Final Yay, and just to make sure, you want to make sure that it's like 15 point something megabytes, right? This indicates that the images were actually packed in, right? We actually have a file size that's larger than like a couple kilobytes. So now let's go over to the Concierge Render website, which there's a link for in the description if you're interested, but I will meet you in a second over at the website. Okay, we've made it to Concierge Render. I've blurred out my username and password because, I don't want you guys knowing that. Either way, you make an account, you click sign in, or you make account. You're gonna have some kind of balance depending on how much money you put in here, and the idea is we are rendering extremely quickly for what is hopefully not a very expensive cost. Now the bigger your scene is, of course, the more this is going to cost, but for something like this hamburger scene, it's something like 200 samples for 45 frames. It shouldn't be a big deal. So this is basically your dashboard. How do you upload a thing and get it started? So it's pretty obvious. You go to Upload and Launch Renders. Again, you want to make sure you've done all that prep work on your blend file or you have the add-on. You go to Upload Files, and what are we going to upload? Well, again, we do not need a folder because we've packed everything in there. If you have a simulation, that's the kind of thing you need a folder for, right? Because you have your simulation cache. I'm going to type in, what did we call it? Burger Final Yay. click open, and it's going to start uploading. And hopefully I don't need to cut, because it seems like it's uploading pretty quickly. I've upgraded my Wi-Fi recently. I got this new antenna, and it's working like a charm. So burger final yay, it's here. We're going to go to actions. We're going to go to launch render. Why? Because we want to launch a render. I know, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And what it's doing right now is it's basically looking at our scene, not only, putting it on their server, but also being like, what sample count is it using? What render settings is it? What render settings is it using, etc. And you can see that when it's done analyzing, we get this menu that we can pick a bunch of options for. So first of all, render platform, I'm going to choose the newest version of Blender that is supported. So in my case, 2.91. As long as you did that make instances real thing, it's not a big deal. Or you can wait for geometry nodes to be compatible, but that's probably going to take a while because it's still an alpha and stuff like this. Pick the newest Blender version. Render engine, I'm using cycles, so let's just use cycles. Render type, this part's pretty important. You can actually render a preview, so you don't need to pay anything for this. This is just to make sure that it's rendering what you expect it to render. In my case, I know we set it up correctly, so there's no point. I'm going to render an animation, and then you want to go to the next section of frames, resolution, etc. So we go there. We say start frame, end frame. You can see it's already imported that in successfully. However, if you want to only render a section of it, you could just type in, only the first 15 frames or whatever. But I'm going to do the full animation, okay? 1 through 45. Next, we have resolution. Do you want 1080p, 4K, native resolution, whatever? I'm just going to pick, you could either do native resolution, which is what we put in our project settings, or you could do custom resolution or 1080p. In this case, they're all the same. However, if you put in you have a very special resolution, you might need to put this in manually. In my case, a lot of these end up working. So 1080p, 1920 by 1080, and then the sample count, we can also change here. You don't need to go back in and re-upload a one file with a different sample count number. It imports it in. I'm fine with 200. I don't need to edit it. Okay. Next down the line, hardware. What hardware do you want to use? This is where it gets pretty technical. Point is, some hardware is going to be faster than others, but some hardware is also going to be more expensive than others. So it's basically dependent on you. Do you want something fast that's a bit more expensive, or slower but cheaper? I'm just going to go with the basic thing. Nothing to think about. Okay. So click render, and then let's see what happens. So we've picked all our settings. It's basically getting queued up, and here we go. Render launch, burger, final, yay, etc. And it will prompt us to go over to the job manager. So let's do that. And you can see, and by the way, I've rendered a bunch of projects on this in the past, which is why you see all of these. You're probably only going to see a single one if it's your first time. We have our project. You can go to view details, and it's going to tell you a bunch of stuff about it. So for example, what kind of thing are we using? We're using the basic $1.50 per node per hour, which is basically saying it's on these machines, or on some number of machines. This is how much it will cost to run this amount of time in calculation. We also have, it's an animation type, average frame duration, average cost, and right now it's going to, you can see the status bar. It's going to be rendering. And it's going to keep updating the cost of this. So I think what I'm going to do, I kind of want to not cut, but whatever. I'm going to cut. I'll be back in 30 seconds when this is done. Okay, our render's complete. How long did it take? Well, it started at this time and ended at this time, so it took 20 seconds. In contrast, by the way, if I was to render this on my computer, it'd probably take this amount of time per frame, probably even a bit more, so it'd be 45 to 60 times slower. And this only becomes more and more useful the bigger your scene is with the more frames, etc. And you can see it didn't take a long time. It was less than $0.50, 40 cents. And usually, as long as your scene's not huge, these prices tend to be very low. So I already had 27 something dollars, and it's only dug in 41 cents. And you can see these are all the frames that are done. You can either download them one by one, like a lunatic, doesn't make any sense, or you could download all of them at the same time. And it should give us a zip file. I'm going to save it on the desktop. It should download pretty quickly. And when you actually play out this PNG sequence, I guess you're seeing the render right now. This is what it gives you. Basically, it should be the same output as if you were to, is what I'm trying to say, render it on one computer, but the only difference is it doesn't take forever. So there you go. Concierge Render is the sponsor of this video, and that's a way to render. So anyways, thank you for watching the hamburger tutorial series. It was a long haul, but I think I taught a lot of tricks, and I wanted to do it properly with a good blend of proceduralism and also some like textures, just, you know, basically just ripping images off of Google Images. I wanted to make kind of the most realistic, in some sense, hamburger that you can make without like photo scanning or photogrammetry or something like this. So anyways, thank you for watching all 4 parts of the series. Very cool of you, and I think at this point I'm a bid you adieu. So see ya.